SpongeBob Mandela effects.
From SpongeBob.
You know Sandy, right?
Yeah.
Her suit is obviously like the white suit with the helmet on top. Does she have something on her back?
Isn't it the oxygen tank or whatever?
So apparently she never had that. Apparently she never had the box in the back to give her oxygen and shit.
So her back is just completely naked. It has nothing.
It's blank, bro. It's just white, like an astronaut suit. But I clearly remember having a fucking backpack.
Yeah.
The other one that's very, very big. Do you remember the movie when they go and get the crown for King Neptune?
Yeah.
At the end scene when SpongeBob is about to go crazy with the guitar.
And he starts destroying people's helmets?
With a guitar, right? How do you remember the guitar looking like?
Isn't it the peanut?
You don't remember it's a white guitar with two like...
That one, no. I remember it being a peanut.
Yeah, so it's always been a peanut, this one.
Yeah, that's what I remember, the peanut.
But a lot of people remember it like this.
What the f? I mean, I understand. It does look like it would be part of it costume. You know what I think it is, though?
What?
I don't think it's a Mandela effect. I think it's because, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's an episode of SpongeBob where Sandy, she's playing a guitar and it looks exactly like that.
In 2015, Chase Dowo was hunting with his brother in Montana when a worst nightmare situation happened. He came face to face with a male grizzly bear weighing up to 400 pounds. Chase only managed to walk a few steps backwards before the bear knocked him down and bit him directly on his head. After this, he bit Chase's leg and shook it around like a dog playing with a toy. The bear then tossed him in the air and continued to try and bite him. As the bear continued to attack him, Chase remembered a story that he read in a magazine once, and I quote, "I remember an article my grandma gave me a long time ago that said large animals have bad gag reflexes. So I shoved my right arm down his throat." Crazy enough, after Chase did this, the bear left and Chase escaped what was almost certain death. Chase's brother then drove him to a hospital where he received treatment for gashes he sustained during the attack. Thankfully, he did not sustain any life-threatening injuries and went on to make a full recovery. But as crazy as it is, if he didn't shove his arm down the bear's throat, he would most likely be dead right now.
Crystal filed a lawsuit against P. Diddy, including some seriously disturbing allegations. Crystal McKinney was just 17 years old when she won a modelling competition through MTV. She ended up becoming very successful very quickly as a result of this and working with brands such as Tommy Hilfiger. In 2003, she was invited to a men's fashion show by a designer. She states in a lawsuit that she was told she was going to be meeting P. Diddy and she was made to dye her hair really light so that he would find her attractive. She also claimed that they made her wear a very specific outfit so that he would find her more attractive, and she later kept this as evidence wrapped in plastic due to the nature of the alleged horrific incidents that would unfold. She states she was taken for a dinner with P. Diddy where he repeatedly tried it on with her. She claims she was later taken back to a room where P. Diddy was there with a bunch of other men all taking substances. She states that at one point he shoved her into the bathroom and SA'd her. She states that she eventually lost consciousness and then woke up in a taxi back to the designer's apartment. She states that she was left absolutely traumatized by the whole experience, and she's filed the lawsuits to seek justice for herself and for any other of his victims.
Tonight, we are in Indiana at the Randolph County Asylum.
It's the scariest place in America and very haunted.
All right, everybody, so we're here in the asylum, and we have our special guest.
We're here. Paranormal Nightmare, Paranormal Files.
The Nightmare Files.
Nightmare Files.
Yeah, there you go.
We've got the creeper. It looks like an octopus. We've got about 51 to 53 bodies buried out there and one mummy. Doris Addington is still very active in this kitchen. Now,
Oh my God.
I came down. You saw it?
they want your attention.
That is absolutely crazy.
Dude.
What is this? Oh, yeah.
Would you like to have us back?
So what you heard the female?
Yeah.
Who murdered you? Can you please tell us their name?
Hey, here's the butcher block.
Cattle.
Trust me.
Again.
Dude, that was crazy.
Yeah.
There's a strange missing persons case happening right now out of Montana, and we should talk about it. This is Renee Arcand. She went missing during a 5-day camping trip near Glendive last June, and the details surrounding her disappearance are still a mystery. Renee was last seen on June 26th of this year at the Fish Intake Campground, which is a really popular paddle fishing site. At the time of her disappearance, she was traveling from Wisconsin, where she was from, to Oregon, and in that last week of June, she decided to stop and camp for a few days in Montana. In the days prior, Renee was working at the Buffalo Gap Guest Ranch in North Dakota, which is about an hour east of Glendive. There she was working with a man who has not yet been publicly identified, and the two decided to camp together at the Fish Intake Campground, which is along the Yellowstone River. According to the man, on the night of June 26th, he, Renee, and her 2 dogs camped out in her dark blue 2011 Toyota Scion. He states that he went to sleep that night in her car with her 2 dogs, and when he woke up the next morning, Renee was gone. Almost all of her personal belongings were left behind, including the car, obviously, and her 2 dogs. But one material item was missing along with Renee, and that was her iPad. According to the man, he then spent the next few days looking for Renee, and he officially reported her missing 3 days later on June 30th. The Dawson County Sheriff's Office immediately started looking for Renee, and they, along with volunteers and Badlands Search and Rescue, have since searched the Yellowstone River and 20 miles around the area where she went missing. Almost every inch of the campground and surrounding areas have been searched, using boats, drones, cadaver dogs, helicopters, and even using sonar equipment. But absolutely no trace of Renee has been found, and it's like she vanished into thin air. The river was reportedly really high at the time and incredibly muddy and deep, and the current was estimated to be roughly 8 miles an hour. The sheriff has stated that it's really rare that someone goes missing in the Yellowstone River, but it does happen. Although they did state that they usually would have been found by now. No witnesses in the area saw Renee go into the river, although at this point, the police assume she did. It's important to note that on August 13th, just 2 months after Renee went missing, human remains were found in the area, but they have since been ruled out and do not belong to Renee. The man who Renee was camping with has reportedly been cooperating with law enforcement, and he did tell authorities his story of what took place. The DCSO has stated that so far the man's story does check out, and whatever reason he gave for having such a big time gap before reporting her missing makes sense. What's strange though is that one of Renee's beloved dogs, a Chihuahua mix named Bean, is also now missing in a separate but related incident. Apparently after Renee went missing, the man she was traveling with kept her dogs, Bean and Zizzy, but as he was driving back to North Dakota just a day after Renee was reported missing, he reportedly let Bean and Zizzy out to go to the bathroom, where they then both ran away. Zizzy was eventually found 15 miles outside of Glendive, but Bean is still missing. He was last seen near the Montana-North Dakota state line. The police still have Renee's car, and authorities have since tried to ping her iPad that is also still missing, but the location was turned off and it no longer has a connection. Workers at the campsite have confirmed that they did in fact see Renee at the campground the night she went missing, but it's now been 6 months, and Renee is still missing. So far, the police have said that this is not a criminal investigation, but the circumstances surrounding Renee's disappearance remain a mystery. Boaters, fishermen, and hunters in the area are asked to keep their eyes open for any clues. And if you were by chance camping at the Fish Intake Campground the week of June 26th, please try to remember if you might have seen Renee or her car. Renee is described as being 5'5", 150 pounds, and has brown hair and hazel eyes. She also has a tattoo on her wrist that says, "This too will pass." If you have any information at all, please contact the Dawson County Sheriff's Office at 406-377-5291.
This was a TikToker. He went by the name of Jin Kid. He basically went viral for mainly impersonating Scarface, Tony Montana.
Okay. What can I get you?
Hey, handsome.
What the fuck you calling me?
Sorry, man. I'll have a venti dolce caramel macchiato with no ice.
What the fuck is wrong with this guy, man? You kidding me?
Okay, I've definitely seen him before.
He had over 1 million on TikTok, and he ended up meeting his wife, Anna Marie. When he first became boyfriend and girlfriend, whatever, he automatically became obsessed. Her friends would call Anna Marie, and he would pick up, like, "Oh, what do you want?"
What the fuck you calling?
A little after that, his wife decided to start doing content as well.
In reality, it's some going on.
He slowly starts getting into alcohol and cocaine, and he just starts talking crazy to his wife. Sooner or later, obviously, she gets tired of the whole abuse. They obviously end up filing for divorce. She ends up kicking him out. She moves out to a different apartment, not knowing that he already had made a copy of the key to go inside the apartment, bro. The next day, she ends up asking one of her friends, her guy friends, to come over and help her clean up the mess. Maybe make her feel a little bit more safe, because this motherfucker is crazy. While he was over, this whole time, this mother ended up putting a spying app on her tablet that it allows you to hear the room.
I was just about to say,
He starts listening.
Hears Emil's voice with his ex now.
As soon as he hears that, he ends up driving to her apartment. He goes into the house. He ends up shooting her friend 3 times and then shoots her in the head 1 time. He ended up going to pick up his daughter from...
It's one crime case you need answers to before you die. I'll go first. This is the most disturbing disappearance caught on camera. Lars Mittank was a 28-year-old from Berlin. In June 2014, he went on his first lads' holiday to Bulgaria. The holiday was going well, but on July the 6th, the day prior to the boys' departure, the group went to a pub to watch the World Cup quarter-final. During the match, Lars apparently got into a fight with a bunch of German tourists. Later that night, Lars vanished, and when he reappeared the following day, he had a disturbing tale to tell. He told his friends that he'd been beaten up and had sustained a nasty injury to both his jaw and his eardrum. He was advised not to fly home due to this. Now, his friends all offered to stay with him, but allegedly, Lars had said to them, "No, it's fine, you go home, I'll just wait a couple of days and then fly on my own." However, after the friend's flight home, he apparently started acting strangely after checking into this hotel. He called his mum Sandra the one evening, whispering down the phone to her, stating that people were trying to kill him. He also asked her to cancel his credit and debit cards, and CCTV of him in the hotel was also incredibly disturbing. He was kind of creeping around looking like he was hiding from someone. He was last seen at Varna Airport on July the 8th. He went to see the airport doctor before his flight to see if he was safe to fly home. The doctor described his behaviour as nervous and erratic, and suddenly Lars started shouting, "I don't want to die here, I have to get out of here." He was captured on CCTV sprinting out of the airport and has never been seen to this day. So what happened to Lars? I've done a deep dive into the investigation and into all of the theories about his disappearance on my podcast, The Bourne Investigation.
This is a story that everyone should know. This is Lisbeth Medina. She was a 16-year-old high school cheerleader who was found stabbed to death in her bathtub on December 5th. This is everything we know so far. On December 5th, Lisbeth's mom became worried about her after she didn't show up for an annual lighted Christmas parade in Edna, Texas. Lisbeth was supposed to be marching in the parade with her cheer squad, and when her mom couldn't find her, she rushed back to their home around 7 p.m. at the Cottonwood Apartments, and it was there that she discovered a gruesome scene. Lisbeth had been stabbed to death, and she was left in her bathtub. It was clear that she had been getting ready for the parade, and she was still in her pajamas. Edna police started looking for any leads because Lisbeth was just 16 years old. She didn't have any enemies, and this completely shocked the small community. Authorities soon discovered grainy surveillance footage of a possible suspect in the area, and they also disclosed a vehicle of interest, which was a silver Ford Taurus. Finally, on Saturday, police were given a tip which sent them to the small town of Schulenburg, Texas, and it was there that they arrested 23-year-old Rafael Romero at his family home. Authorities have confirmed that Rafael does own a silver Ford Taurus, which they've seized evidence from linking him to Lisbeth. According to Edna police, Rafael has been living in Texas illegally on an expired visa, while his family has been living in Schulenburg for about 5 years. At this point, police have not discovered a motive for the killing, and they're trying to figure out if the two even knew each other. But they are saying that it is an isolated incident. Lisbeth's family has stated that they don't recognize Rafael or his family at all, but they do wonder if this was possibly related to a recent break-in attempt. Lisbeth's mom said that a few weeks before her murder, someone tried breaking into their home, and it's now left them wondering if this was the same intruder who may have tried breaking in again, but was taken by surprise that Lisbeth was home. Rafael has since been booked into the Jackson County Jail and charged with capital murder. This story is just absolutely heartbreaking. Lisbeth's mom had her when she was just 16 years old herself. She said that they grew up together, and it was just them against the world. The two had just moved to Edna last year, which makes the story even more heartbreaking. Lisbeth was described as bubbly, happy, and confident, and she dreamed of becoming a nurse. Her face lit up whenever she cheered for her high school, and she'll be very missed. This should have never happened. I've attached a GoFundMe set up for the Medina family to help get them through this horrific time. And if you'd like to show your support and keep up to date with the information on the case, go follow the Facebook group Justice for Lisbeth Medina.
This story is disturbing. This former Arkansas state representative tried to adopt 3 girls. He then allegedly tried to have the girls exorcised before eventually rehoming them with a pedophile. So this is Justin Harris, and he and his wife tried to adopt 3 sisters in the year 2013. However, upon welcoming the 3 girls into their home, Justin and his wife discovered that the eldest sister had reactive attachment disorder, which prevents children from forging a bond with other children. The eldest sister then threatened to murder Justin's eldest 3 sons, and they never finalized her adoption. Justin and his wife then decided to give up on the whole thing when the middle daughter also was diagnosed with RAD. Keep in mind, at the time that these girls went into their house, they were 4 years, 2 years, and 9 months old. So in the spring of 2013, the family's babysitter, a girl named Chelsea Goldsboro, reported that the family was trying to perform exorcisms on the 3 young sisters. Chelsea later stated that Justin's wife, Marcia, told her the girls had demons and they could telepathically speak to each other, and that a demon was lifting up off the bed, like levitating, and that a, quote, demon was having sex with the middle sister. Justin and his wife have denied that this ever happened, but I don't know why a babysitter would make up such outlandish claims. And this is where the story gets really dark. So Justin and his wife didn't want to be charged with abandonment if they gave up the 3 girls. So instead of giving the girls back to the state, to the foster care system, they gave them to one of Justin's friends, a man named Eric Francis. Now, from the outside, Eric may have appeared that he would be a suitable father for these young girls, but Eric was a hardcore closeted pedophile. But you see, at the time, Eric was the head teacher at a Christian academy that Justin Harris ran. He already had other adopted children with his wife, and he was seen as a family man, a good, God-fearing guy. But only 6 months after he was given possession of the 3 girls, Eric was arrested and then eventually convicted of assaulting violently the 6-year-old middle child. So this obviously blew up into a massive scandal for Justin Harris. And after all of this happened, this was a huge scandal in the media. Justin announced he wouldn't be seeking another term in office, and he actually supported a bill against rehousing children. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms now.
This is the scariest story about the peephole, and this story is absolutely disturbing. A 15-year-old girl named Donna lived with her father in a very small house. Ever since her mother died, Donna had depended on her dad for literally everything. One morning, Donna's father was leaving for a business trip and he told her he wouldn't be back until later that night. And with that, he kissed Donna on the cheek and left. Later that day, Donna got home from school and did some homework and then relaxed and watched some TV. The clock then struck midnight and she noticed her father still wasn't back. So Donna decided to just go to bed. That night, Donna had a dream. She found herself standing on the edge of a busy highway. She then looked across the highway and saw a familiar figure standing there. It was her father, and his hands were cupped around his mouth trying to yell something to her. But Donna couldn't figure out what her dad was saying. She also saw that his eyes looked very sad, and he seemed to be desperately trying to communicate with her. She could barely make out the words he was saying, but it sounded like he was saying, "Don't open the door." Suddenly, Donna woke up to a tapping noise. Then suddenly, somebody rang the doorbell. Donna then got out of bed, got dressed, and then scrambled down to the front door. She then looked through the peephole and saw her father's face outside. He was staring directly at her and the doorbell was still ringing. "Okay, hold on, I'm coming," she shouted. She pulled back the deadbolt and was about to unlock the door when she suddenly stopped. She then looked through the peephole again and noticed there was something very off about her father's expression. His eyes were wide open and he looked very terrified. She then slid the deadbolt back into place and said, "Dad, did you forget your keys?" But the doorbell just kept ringing. "Dad, answer me," she said, but the doorbell continued to ring. "Dad, please, I need you to answer me. Is there somebody else out there with you?" But there was no answer and the doorbell continued to ring. Donna then yelled at the top of her lungs, "I'm not opening this door until you answer me." The doorbell continued to ring and her father did not answer her desperate cries. For the rest of the night, Donna sat in the corner next to the door crying and helplessly listening to the doorbell ringing over and over again. She then eventually fell asleep, and in the morning when she woke up, she noticed it was very quiet, so she got up and went over to the peephole. She then looked through it and saw her father still standing there staring. She then opened the door and was confronted with a sight that filled her with absolute horror. Her father's severed head was hanging from a nail above the door, and there was a note attached to the doorbell, and in weird sloppy handwriting it read, "You are a very clever girl."
His name is Armin Muez, he had a like really big fetish with cannibalism. This took place in Germany 2001. Average looking guy, bro. Well liked by his community, bro. You just wouldn't think anything bad about him. He ends up signing up on this website called the Cannibal Cafe Forum. It was a place where other people like him, who had all these other cannibal tendencies.
Yeah, like a judge-free zone.
Exactly. He would post forums. I have the forum on my phone too, of what he would look for. He would specifically look for 18 to 25-year-olds to be willingly get killed and then get eaten and stuff. A lot of people would message him, but they would always back out last minute. They wouldn't be able to do it until this one guy, his name is Bernard. Coincidentally enough, he had posted a forum himself of him offering himself to get killed and eaten. They eventually end up meeting up. They have a dinner date after they finish. The plan was for him to sit in the bathtub. Armin was gonna grab a video camera and record the process of it. On camera, he had to say, "It's okay for you to eat me." So then, like, if he ever gets caught, he wouldn't really get in trouble. The footage was 2 hours to 4 hours long. Apparently, the footage was leaked somewhere before. Authorities say that now the footage is completely destroyed, but some images are still up there on Google if you want to find them. The video starts off with him trying to bite a part out of Bernard. Skin was too chewy for him to take off, so he ends up telling him, like, get a knife. He cuts off a piece of he goes back to the kitchen. He starts cooking the piece so they could both eat it together. While they're eating it, it was too burnt to be eaten, so they just give it to the dog. He ends up hanging his body on a meat hook, and that's when he begins to butcher the body, puts the body in his freezer. It was estimated that he ate over 40 pounds. The only reason he got caught was because he
I've covered countless true crime cases, but this one has to be one of the worst. This is the case of Sylvia Likens, who was a 16-year-old girl who, along with her younger sister Jenny, was left in the care of Jarud Benesweski by her parents. Jarud was a single mother with several children of her own. She agreed to take care of the Likens sisters in exchange for a small amount of money every week. The Liken parents were carnival workers and believed their daughters would be safe with Jarud. But that was far from the truth. Things took a horrific turn when Jarud and her children began to subject Sylvia to prolonged physical and emotional abuse. She was physically beaten, starved, and subjected to various forms of torture. Giroud's children and some neighborhood kids also participated in the abuse. Sylvia was kept locked in the basement where she endured unimaginable suffering. Giroud and the children not only beat Sylvia, but they also forced her to write degrading statements all over her own body, including phrases like, "I'm a prostitute and I'm proud of it." Sylvia was also burned with cigarettes, had her head shaved, and was often deprived of food and water. This abuse continued for months. On one occasion, as the family ate supper, Giroud, Paula, and a neighborhood boy named Randy force-fed Sylvia a hot dog overloaded with condiments, including mustard, ketchup, and spices. Sylvia vomited as a result and was later forced to eat her own vomit. On another occasion, Paula, who was Giroud's daughter, beat Sylvia in the face with such force that she broke her own wrist. Later, Paula used the cast on her wrist to further beat Sylvia. Giroud would also occasionally force Jenny, who was her younger sister, to strike her and beat her. And if she did not comply, they would just beat her. Several of Giroud's children's classmates frequently visited the house to both physically and verbally torment Sylvia. And with Giroud's active encouragement, these neighborhood children and her own routinely beat Sylvia, sometimes even using her as a practice dummy in violent judo sessions, also lacerating her body and burning her with lit cigarettes over 100 times. They also severely injured her genitals. To entertain Giroud and her teenage accomplices, Sylvia was forced at one point to strip naked in the family living room and masturbate with a glass Pepsi Cola bottle in their presence. And this was all for the enjoyment of this woman right here. And due to the increase in the frequency and the brutality of the torture and mistreatment of Sylvia, she gradually became incontinent, which is the uncontrolled leakage of urine. She was then denied any access to the bathroom, being forced to wet herself. And as a form of punishment, Giroud threw Sylvia into the basement and tied her up. Here, Sylvia was kept naked, rarely fed, and frequently deprived of water. Occasionally, she was tied to the railing of the basement stairs with her feet barely touching the ground. On October 25th, Sylvia attempted to escape from the basement after overhearing a conversation, after overhearing Giroud say they were just going to leave her to die in the basement. Sylvia attempted to flee to the front door, however, due to her extensive injuries and general weakness, Giroud caught her before she could escape the property. And on the morning of October 26, 1965, Sylvia Likens tragically succumbed to her injuries and died in the basement. Her cause of death was a combination of severe malnutrition, physical trauma, and the overall abuse she endured. Her body was found with numerous injuries, including broken bones and extensive scarring, and the autopsy showed that there was more than 150 wounds across her body. Giroud was found guilty of first-degree murder and she was sentenced to life in prison. But somehow she was released in 1985 on parole, which is just sickening. She deserves to be underneath the prison. This is just absolutely horrifying. The Sylvia Likens case is a heartbreaking and disturbing true crime story that continues to captivate and horrify people to this day. There's a lot more I could talk about in this case, so if you want a part 2, let me know. Rest in peace to Sylvia Likens, and I can't believe this case.
This has always been one of the strangest missing person cases, and there are finally some updates. This is Carly Gousset. She went missing on October 13th, 2018 from her family's home in Chalfont, California. She was officially last seen alongside US Highway 6 in Eastern California. 5 years later, police are now looking for evidence and clues in the town of Tonopah, Nevada. According to an investigator with the sheriff's office in Mono County, California, in March of 2021, his office received a phone call from a recovering drug user who reportedly saw Carly at a party in Tonopah. Tonopah is a historic mining town about 100 miles away from where Carly disappeared. Investigators have not yet released the witness's name or when he reportedly saw Carly, but they have seized a vehicle that they say may have picked Carly up alongside Highway 6 and taken her to Tonopah. This is a major breakthrough, as not a single trace of Carly has been found since she went missing. It's like she vanished into thin air. To kind of recap her case, the night before she disappeared, Carly, who was 16 years old at the time, told her family that she was going to a football game at her high school in Bishop, California. California. But instead, she secretly went to a house party with her then boyfriend and another friend. At the house party, Carly smoked weed, and not long after, she became frantic and paranoid. According to her boyfriend, she became erratic and was scared of the music and him. Carly then called her stepmom Melissa to come and pick her up in Highland Park, which isn't far from the family home. But by the time Melissa got there, Carly was nowhere to be found. She eventually found Carly walking down a dark road looking pale as a ghost about a mile away, and when she got in the car, she was still acting super paranoid and not really making sense. When they got home, Melissa and Carly's dad Zachary tried to calm her down. They believed that whatever she smoked that night was possibly laced with another drug. Melissa spent the rest of the night with Carly trying to comfort her, and she even recorded an 8-minute long conversation she had with Carly in hopes to show her why she should never do drugs again. During that recorded conversation, Carly was sobbing and said to Melissa, quote, "You're going to kill me." In which Melissa replied, quote, "Why would I do such a thing?" Carly can be heard asking to be taken to the hospital, but sadly, that never happened. Melissa eventually went to sleep, and the last time she saw Carly, she was in her bed, and it was around 5:45 that morning. When Melissa woke up for the day, Carly's cell phone was on the counter, the front door was slightly ajar, and Carly was missing. Melissa and Zachary searched the neighborhood, but when they couldn't find her, they called 911. A massive search was launched involving hundreds of volunteers and multiple different agencies, but no trace of Carly was ever found. There were, however, 3 eyewitnesses who claimed to have seen Carly the morning she disappeared. 2 witnesses were neighbors who lived only a few doors down from the Gousset family, who claimed to have seen Carly walking down White Mountain Estates Road holding a piece of paper and looking up at the sky. She was reportedly heading in the direction of Highway 6. A third eyewitness saw someone fitting Carly's description standing in the sagebrush on the side of that same highway, Highway 6. This is the exact same spot where tracking dogs lost Carly's scent. After Carly went missing, her stepmom Melissa started going live on Facebook trying to urge people to help in the search, and a lot of people watching kind of deemed her behavior as suspicious. But again, no one knows how they would truly act when something this horrible happens. Then in 2019, the case was featured on Dr. Phil, where Carly's mom Lindsay said that she suspects that Carly died from a drug overdose, and she questioned whether or not she ever made it out of that house alive. But to this day, police have found no incriminating evidence against Melissa or Zachary. Along with that, they have since both taken a polygraph and they both passed. There's been a lot that has happened since Carly disappeared, such as her dad Zachary being arrested on charges unrelated to her disappearance. In 2021, he was reportedly charged with a felony count of corporal injury to a spouse, but the arrest record has since been removed from the Mono County Sheriff's Office website. Again, this seems to be a domestic violence related incident and not connected to Carly's disappearance. There was also a video on YouTube that went viral from someone dirt biking who claimed to have found Carly or thought they found Carly while in the mountains. They used her picture in the thumbnail and used her story as clickbait. This was confirmed to not be her, but unfortunately, this misinformation spread like wildfire. As of today, 5 years later, Carly is still missing. Anyone with information is urged to contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI.
13-year-old stabbed 2 teachers and her classmate in a school in Wales. She's now charged with attempted murder. Man Valley School is located in Ammanford in Wales and caters to around 1,500 students. The country was stunned this year after a brutal and unprecedented attack involving a 13-year-old girl. On the 24th of April 2024, a teenage girl who has not been named due to her age reportedly spoke with her friend in the toilets. She told her friend that she was going to do something stupid which could get her expelled. She allegedly referenced a teacher, Fiona Elias, known to the girls as Miss Elias. She allegedly showed her friend a knife in her pocket just minutes before a hideous attack. The friend told officers after the attack that she hadn't actually believed her because she, quote, always says stuff we don't believe. The student then saw the girl talking to the teacher and she reportedly stabbed Fiona and another teacher, Liz Hopkins, along with another student. School was put into lockdown just after 11 a.m. that morning. Emergency services were called and helicopters showed up. It later transpired that multiple students came forward to say that the student who allegedly stabbed the teachers and the student had expressed a hatred towards one of the teachers. It's also claimed that the student she stabbed had apparently slapped her a month prior. The girl's trial is currently underway and she denies 3 counts of attempted murder.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
16-year-old was sentenced to 50 years in prison, and you won't believe what he did. In 2022, Noah Nay shot a 5-year-old girl in the neck and shoulder in Oklahoma. This teen, who I swear looks like a 9-year-old, was riding in a stolen car and purposely shot inside a home where the little girl was playing. But again, this was no accident. No one did this for a gang initiation. Luckily, the little girl survived, but had the bullet hit a spot an inch away, she would have definitely died. Noah was arrested, but not long after, he escaped the juvenile detention center by jumping a fence. He was found 4 days later, but when he was put back into the detention center, he repeatedly assaulted staff. Noah was sentenced as an adult, but the judge said that in 2028, his sentence can be reduced if he's proved that he's changed.
I swear the creepiest stuff always happens in hospitals. So Katrina was a nurse in the pediatric oncology part of the hospital, and she was looking after this one little boy that was in rough shape. It seemed like his treatments weren't working anymore, but despite all this, he stayed in pretty good spirits. And he would always wear his Spider-Man costume. Like every day, always in the Spider-Man costume. Sadly, the little boy eventually passed away from his cancer. But then, a few months later, a teen boy gets admitted down the hall. And this was after the little boy had already passed away, so there was no overlap between the two. This boy was also in pretty rough shape and his treatments weren't working anymore. But then one night, a nurse hears him talking to someone inside of his room, but there's no one there. So the nurse goes in to see who he's talking to, and she can't believe what he says. The teen said he just saw a little boy dressed as Spider-Man in his room talking to him. And this little boy was telling him all about Marvel and all about how much he loves Spider-Man. The teen boy ended up passing away a few weeks later, but that story always stuck with the nurses.
A few years after killing Jason Voorhees with a machete, Tommy Jarvis started to have recurring nightmares about the violent serial killer. As a result, he was sent to several psychiatric hospitals, before settling finally at Pinehurst Halfway House. Inmate Joey Burns was killed by fellow inmate Vic Farron not long after Tommy's arrival. A series of murders then happened in the local area when a couple of greasers were killed, followed by a diner waitress and her boyfriend the following night. Local Sheriff Carl Tucker believed that Jason Voorhees was once more alive and committing the murders. The following day, Raymond Joffrey was killed, followed soon after by Tina McCarthy and Eddie Kelso. This was followed by the deaths of Demon Winter and his girlfriend, Ethel and Junior Hubbard, Jake Patterson, Robin Brown, and Violet Moraine. The killer soon revealed himself, and lo and behold, it was Jason in his hockey mask. Or was it? After a battle with Tommy, Jason was thrown out of a loft window and landed on a bed of spikes and died. Upon removal of the hockey mask, the killer was revealed to be Roy Burns, Joey's father, not Jason. After the massacre at Higgins Haven, the body of serial killer Jason Voorhees was taken to the Wessex County morgue. Despite being hit in the head with an axe, Jason woke up and killed both the coroner and a nurse. He left the morgue and headed back to Crystal Lake. Conveniently, a fresh group of teenagers were making their way to Camp Crystal Lake on a weekend getaway. They spotted a hitchhiker on their way but didn't have any room in the car. Soon after they drove past, the hitchhiker was stabbed in the neck and killed by Jason. Upon their arrival at Crystal Lake, the teens had a party, as you do, which naturally didn't go down well with Jason. He then proceeded to kill Samantha, Paul, Terry, Mrs. Jarvis, Jimmy, Tina, Ted, Doug, Sarah and Rob. There's Rob there, bottom right. A showdown between Tommy, Jason and Trish led to Tommy shaving his head, in the hope that Jason would think it was himself as a child and confuse him. It did. Trish hit Jason and his mask fell off. Tommy then drove a machete through his skull. Surely that was the end of Jason.
New things and shit. And this video shows a group of over 40 Golden Corral customers in a massive brawl over a steak shortage at a Pennsylvania location. Police are still investigating to see who threw the first punch. A chicken recently broke into the United States Pentagon before being caught and taken into custody. The Pentagon refuses to release any info on how the hen got in and any secrets it may have discovered. A woman named Darylyn Roberts was recently arrested after pretending to be a sign language interpreter on live TV. I don't know how, but she was on live TV multiple times before someone realized that she was just doing random hand motions. A British dog named Millie got stuck in a mud flat near the ocean with the tide quickly rising. Fortunately, authorities rushed to help using a drone with a sausage tied to it to lead the small dog to safety. Elon Musk himself recently reached out to a teenager who runs a Twitter account that tracks and publishes the location of Musk's private plane. Elon offered the kid $5,000 to shut it down until the kid replied, "How about 50?"
Imagine a teacher at your middle school sending inappropriate pictures on Snapchat and abusing children. Cassidy Krause is a 24-year-old teacher from a school in Iowa. Despite her being listed on Facebook as being married after getting married in July, there are disturbing reports emerging. She was recently arrested and charged with S abuse after sending obscene materials to a minor. It's believed that she sent inappropriate material to students via Snapchat, and she has resigned from her role at the school. She's accused of SAing at least 3 students while employed by the school, the youngest student being just 13 years old. Court records show that her husband filed for divorce from her on the 28th of August. She currently faces up to 33 years in prison if convicted. It's reported that she has posted a $10,000 bond and has been released from jail for now. She is scheduled to return back to court on Thursday. She is yet to enter a plea. There has been a mass shooting in Indianapolis at a Halloween party. Police received multiple phone calls about a large party after midnight on Sunday the 29th of October. When authorities responded to the scene to disperse the party, they heard gunshots. A large crowd started running from the area. Tragically, a 16-year-old girl was pronounced dead at the scene and 9 others were injured. The victims' ages are believed to be between 16 and 22 years old. All 9 survivors were rushed to local hospitals and are in a stable condition. Reportedly, the party had several hundred people and 6 firearms were found at the crime scene. The promoter of the party is believed to have been inviting people to attend via Snapchat and Cash App. Police are begging anyone with any information to come forward and help them with the investigation. The deputy stated no one deserves to die at 16 years old because they go to a party. They said, "We're going to do everything as a law enforcement agency to do our part, but we need you to do your part."
Gruesome sports injuries that traumatize fans, Part 2. In 2017, Akil Mitchell took an awkward fall during which his eye completely popped out of its socket. Miraculously, he regained his vision about a month later, but now is forced to play with protective glasses. Paul George was playing in a 2014 Team USA scrimmage when he jumped up to block a layup. On the way down, his foot landed awkwardly against the hoop's pole and his lower leg horrifically snapped in half. In the Olympic qualifiers, French gymnast Samir Ait Said landed badly after a huge vault, causing his left leg to break in multiple places. In 1985, quarterback Joe Theismann was sacked, completely busting his right leg in half. 33 years later, on the same team in the same city in basically identical parts of the field, a player named Alex Smith suffered an equally disturbing injury to his right leg. The final score of both games, 23-31.
People now think there's drone footage that confirms that this ghost is real. Oh my god. So since the 1980s, locals in Cannock Chase in the UK have claimed to see the ghost of a black-eyed little girl in the woods. Multiple witnesses have reported seeing a little girl with soulless black eyes and a crooked neck popping out of the woods. Some say she's searching for her mother, and others say that she feels demonic. But now reports are saying that a drone may have caught a photo of her. This is the image that was captured this week, and people are saying they think this is the girl. Here's a close-up image of it where you can see her hair, you can see her crooked neck, and you can see the black eyes. But what do you think? Is it her?
Imagine starting to date a new guy, all is going well, and a month later he murders you with an ice pick. Katie Pham and Daniel Gunnarsson had been dating for around a month. Prior to the tragic event, friends of the Californian pair had been growing in concern at Daniel's behaviour. It was reported he started showing animosity towards his 21-year-old girlfriend. It was the 18th of May 2021 and Daniel went to his stepdad's home in Ridgecrest. When he arrived, he confided in him around his failing relationship. He then called Katie and arranged to pick her up. He then drove her back to his dad's house. He led Katie to the garage where the unthinkable happened. It wasn't until painters arrived at the house that the horrific scene was discovered. Now, it's reported that the painters had actually heard a woman screaming, but it wasn't until an hour later that they opened the garage and found a hideous scene. They found Katie dead, partially unclothed and lying face down, and David covered in blood. Police were called and David was charged with murder. Evidence from the scene showed that David had put gloves on and used a 24-inch long ice axe to attack Katie. Once she was deceased, he SA'd her. He was given 25 years to life in prison, plus an additional 2 years and 4 months.
This pedophile mom in Ohio committed one of the most horrific crimes I've ever read about. I'm going to add a trigger warning in here right now. This is a very, very disturbing story, so viewer discretion is advised. So this is Ashley Jessup from Ohio. And in 2012, she was found guilty of rape and sentenced to life in prison. But who did Ashley assault? Well, it was her own 10-month-old baby. At the time of this crime, Ashley was dating 24-year-old Jordan Russell. The two seemed to be very in love, and they frequently exchanged explicit materials over email and text message, of themselves, obviously. But then in August of 2011, Jordan asked Ashley to do something shocking. He asked her to perform explicit acts on her own 10-month-old baby son. And obviously he wanted her to film it and send it to him so he could keep these videos and images. And for some shocking reason, Ashley actually obliged. And she performed graphic and gruesome acts on her own son. So later that month, Jordan had actually broken up with Ashley and he already had a new girlfriend. And this new girlfriend of Jordan's was going through his computer when she discovered these extremely disturbing images and contacted the police. So obviously when the details of this case were made public, everybody was absolutely shocked. And the judge in this case actually stated that in his 30-year career, this was one of the most bizarre and disturbing cases he had ever had to cover. So Ashley was eventually convicted of a litany of charges, including assault, rape on a minor, everything like that. And she's still in prison to this day, serving out that life sentence. Now, this is a really, really disturbing story, and I really do think that she should be in prison for a very, very long time.
These are haunting pictures of people moments before their death. This is Roman Gonzalez, a Puerto Rican singer with a huge fan base. He had millions upon millions of listeners worldwide. Early in 2014, he was involved in a motorbike crash with another vehicle, resulting in his death at the age of 27. The picture you see on the screen right now was taken by Roman moments before the accident killed him. It's unknown whether this selfie was a factor in his death. But literally moments after this picture was taken, his life ended. He was just enjoying his day, not thinking about dying at all. It goes to show that you have to sit back and take everything in once in a while. Next up is a photo of Petra and Gary Slock. Now, this photo wouldn't be eerie at all if it wasn't taken on the doomed Malaysia Airlines flight MH17. This plane was allegedly shot down by pro-Russian separatists on July 17, 2014, leading to an ongoing international investigation. Everyone on board flight MH17 was killed in the attack. Gary Slock and his mother Petra Slock took this photo right before takeoff, making them among the victims of the tragedy. May they rest in peace. Next up is the last photo ever taken of Princess Diana. The death of Princess Diana might be one of the most controversial deaths in history because there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding her car crash, and many people think it was a cover-up, and many others think she was killed by the high-ups in England. This photo was taken by one of the paparazzi photographers in front of the vehicle only moments before the fatal crash. So, what do you think happened? This is Pavel Kashin, who is a free runner. He would often perform jaw-dropping stunts with friends in dangerously high places. But unfortunately, Pavel made a fatal error during one of his sessions. This photo shows Pavel just moments after he lost his balance after landing a backflip off the wall. He then died after falling 16 stories. I would never understand parkour and free running for this exact reason, but people like to do what they like to do. May Pavel Kashin rest in peace. You won't believe what these parents did to their daughter, and before I begin, this is a massive trigger warning. This is Lacey Fletcher, and her parents let her rot away on their sofa in her own waste up to 12 years. 36-year-old Lacey Fletcher's body was found fused to the couch. Lacey was semi-naked and sitting upright in a sunken crevice in the sofa when she was found by police officers. She weighed 96 pounds and was covered in urine, feces, and maggots. Lacey was homeschooled since high school, suffered social anxiety, and had a severe case of Asperger's. But what makes this case so sinister is that Lacey had locked-in syndrome, which is when you're completely aware of everything going on around you, but you can't move any parts of your body except your eyes, and you can't talk. Meaning Lacey was sitting in this same position for 12 years in her own feces, urine, and maggots, completely aware of what's going on around her, but there's nothing she could do about it. All while her parents are living in the same house as her as she rots away. When the officers reached the house, they said the stench was so strong it almost made them puke. Lacey's body was completely surrounded and covered in feces and urine, and there were also severe ulcers on the body's underside. Her body also appeared completely rotten to the bone. She also appeared to have feces shoved in her face, chest, and stomach. But the sad thing about this case is that Lacey Fletcher's parents just completely gave up on her. Since she had locked-in syndrome, they just placed her on the couch and let her sit there for years on years on years, barely feeding her and never cleaning her. Her parents were in this house showering, cooking, and just relaxing, all while their daughter was rotting away slowly on the couch because of them. Can you just imagine having locked-in syndrome and being placed on a couch by your parents, and then you get neglected, starved, and ignored for years, and all you can do is just think in your own head about what's going on? Lacey could never ask her parents what they were doing because she couldn't talk. So you could only imagine the fear and anxiety Lacey was feeling throughout the 12 years she was stuck on the couch. This is one of the most sickening and inhumane cases ever, and may Lacey rest in peace.
I must admit, I have been putting this one off. Arthur's story does need to be told, but having a son the exact same age as Arthur was when he died, it's been absolutely heartbreaking researching his story. Trigger warning, as always, some of the details are quite hard to listen to. Arthur actually lived with his mother Olivia until early 2019. She described him as the light of her life, but she did have problems with alcohol and would often argue with men that she was seeing. One of those men was Gary Cunningham. Ironically, they met at an alcohol awareness course and began seeing each other, but their relationship was extremely violent and toxic. In February 2019, one evening after they'd been drinking, they got into an extremely violent argument, and Olivia grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed Gary multiple times, killing him. She was sentenced to 18 years for manslaughter, which meant that Arthur then had to go and live with his father, Thomas Hughes. Just over a year later, Arthur was murdered. In April 2019, Thomas met a woman on a dating app, and he quickly introduced her to Arthur. Emma Tustin had her own place, while Thomas and Arthur were actually living in an annex behind Thomas's parents' house. And when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and the UK went into lockdown, Thomas took Arthur and they moved in with Emma. Just before his school closed due to lockdown, Arthur's teacher had actually expressed some concerns about his behaviour. She said that he'd developed an obsession with death and guns, along with a fear of being separated from or killed by his father. A meeting was set up between the school and Arthur's father, Thomas, and Arthur was actually seen by a number of medical professionals, but nothing came of it. And then the lockdown hit and Arthur was forced to spend all his time with his dad and Emma. In April 2020, Arthur's grandmother noticed bruises on his back, and she actually asked Thomas to leave Arthur with her instead of taking him back to Emma's, but he refused, and this actually prompted a call to social services. The next day, a social worker visited the house and the bruises were explained away as being caused by a fight with Emma's son. The social worker concluded that Arthur was happy and safe and that there were no safeguarding issues. In actual fact, Emma had coached the boys on how to lie to professionals and told them that there'd be consequences if they told the truth. This incident was actually reported again by Arthur's uncle, but wasn't followed up. Over the next few weeks, the abuse against Arthur escalated. He was often forced to stand in the hallway facing a wall for hours on end, and Emma would often record him when he was upset and send the clips to his father, Thomas. In these clips, Arthur could be heard saying "no one loves me," as well as crying for his grandmother and uncle. I'll play one of the clips now, just a trigger warning again because it is hard to listen to. In June 2020, cameras were set up inside the home by Emma to make sure Arthur complied with his punishments. He was also moved from one of the upstairs bedrooms and forced to sleep on the living room floor. On these recordings, Arthur could be seen standing in the hallway facing the wall while the rest of the family enjoyed a takeaway. And on another occasion, Thomas and Emma were seen enjoying an ice cream on a scorching hot day, while Arthur was forced to wear a fleecy onesie that he wasn't allowed to take off. Between the 12th and 14th of June, Arthur actually spent a total of 35 hours standing in that hallway facing the wall. And on June 15th, he was taken with Emma to her hairdresser's house, where she forced him to stand in the doorway the entire time they were there. When Thomas arrived to pick them up, Arthur collapsed in the doorway and wasn't helped by either of them. That night, Thomas hit Arthur around the legs with a belt repeatedly and then told Emma to just end him. The next day, Emma sent Thomas a photo of his dying son and then called 999. Footage from that day showed that Arthur was incredibly weak and exhausted. He couldn't even pick his bedding up off the living room floor. Emma had attempted to poison Arthur with salt in the bathroom, and she'd then attacked him in the hallway upstairs. She violently shook Arthur and then slammed his head against the floor multiple times, resulting in a fatal brain injury. She told paramedics when they arrived that his injuries were self-inflicted and that he'd actually banged his own head on the floor 5 times. Arthur was found to have over 130 bruises on his head and body. He was severely malnourished, underweight, and his gums were bleeding. Despite the hospital's best efforts, they couldn't save him, and Arthur passed away at 1 a.m. the next day at Birmingham Children's Hospital. Emma and Thomas were arrested on suspicion of murder, and an investigation began, with police trawling through hours of CCTV footage, as well as audio clips and messages on both of their phones. The evidence clearly illustrated the systematic cruelty inflicted on Arthur. Arthur's death was caused by a head trauma inflicted on him by an adult, and the most likely way this had happened was from him being violently shaken and having his head repeatedly slammed against a hard surface. Hospital tests also revealed a really high level of salt in Arthur's system, and a specialist kidney consultant said that for the levels to be that high, he either had to have consumed 6 tablespoons of salt on the day that he was fatally injured, or that his food and water was being contaminated over a long period of time. The trial of Emma Tustin and Thomas Hughes began in October 2021, and the presiding judge, Mr. Justice Mark Wall, described it as one of the most distressing and disturbing cases he's ever had to work on. In December 2021, Emma Tustin was found guilty of the murder of Arthur and sentenced to life for the minimum of 29 years. She's being held at HMP Peterborough. Arthur's father, Thomas Hughes, was convicted of manslaughter and originally given a sentence of 21 years, but this was increased in July 2022 to 24 years, and he's being held at HMP Wakefield. A review into Arthur's death showed that Child Protective Services had been involved in his life since 2018 and had repeatedly not intervened to help him. A panel have now put in place recommendations to improve safeguarding children in Solihull and Bradford, but sadly it comes too late for Arthur.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
This little girl was kidnapped in 2018 and has just been found. On the 25th of October 2018, 4-year-old Aranza Lopez was on a supervised visit with her biological mum. Her mum, Esmeralda, was being investigated over abuse allegations, so Aranza was actually in foster care at the time. It was arranged that the pair would have a supervised visit at a Washington shopping centre. However, during the visit, Esmeralda requested to take Aranza to the toilets and used the opportunity to snatch the little girl in a stolen vehicle. The FBI were notified and a huge search for Aranza and even advertised a $10,000 reward. It wasn't until a year later that Esmeralda was found and arrested, but there was still no sign of the little girl. That was until last month. She was recovered by Mexican authorities in February in western Mexico. In 2021, Esmeralda was actually extradited back to Washington State and pled guilty to second-degree kidnapping and robbery. She was sentenced to 20 months in prison. This woman screamed, "I don't want to die," as she was dragged to her death in a horrifying theme park incident. Kelty Byrne was a Canadian student animal trainer and competitive swimmer. She was working at Sealand of the Pacific to earn extra money, and this involved being trained to work with orcas, otherwise known as killer whales. In controversial theme parks such as Sealand of the Pacific and SeaWorld, huge animals are either bred in captivity or traumatically captured and ripped apart from their families and natural habitats for humans' entertainment. On February the 20th, 1991, Kelty was working a shift and 3 whales were in one of the pools, including the infamous Tilikum. In a horrific turn of events, Kelty accidentally slipped and fell into the whale pool and attempted to grab onto the edge and save herself. However, before she could do so, she was grabbed by one of the whales that dragged her into the pool. The three whales then began throwing Kelty around, with many speculating that they may have simply thought this was a game. Others theorised that the whales were so traumatised and angered by their lives in tiny little pools that they took it out on Kelty. She was dragged under the water and then back up, screaming, "I don't want to die." After this horrific ordeal, she eventually drowned. It's reported that she was absolutely covered in bruises, was completely battered, and also covered in teeth marks. If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive, and SA'd for weeks. The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked round her neck. It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in. The nurse started to call police, and at this point the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her two friends. When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him. When Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as her opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Haslett Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges, including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times. Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs and they haven't yet released what they know. This is one of the most disgusting and evil cases I've heard of recently. On the 7th of December 2017, teacher Thelma Boinville was desperately trying to make some extra money. She was doing a cleaning job to earn extra money for her family, and the job suited her as her 8-year-old could come along and play while she worked. This was really handy as it meant she didn't have to fork out for childcare. She set out cleaning some holiday homes on the day in question, and her daughter waited in the car. The spot was a lovely scenic place called Kelky Beach. However, instead of walking in on a normal holiday rental to clean, she walked into a nightmare. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend Haley Dangerand were in the middle of robbing the place. They were scouring through drawers and wardrobes, hunting for valuables to steal. With Thelma walking in, their plan had been foiled. They decided they needed to dispose of their only witness. The evil pair tied up the mother, whose daughter waited unsuspectingly in the car outside. They used a machete, a knife, and a hammer to murder the innocent woman. But the horror was far from over. They exited the holiday home and came across Thelma's young daughter waiting in the car. They callously told the young girl, "We killed your mum," and then bound her up and gagged her. Sickeningly, they then took the 8-year-old into the home where they'd killed her mum and left her there tied up. The 2 Australian tourists who were renting the holiday home then came back and found the crime scene. The 2 killers were tracked down hours later in Thelma's car, which they'd stolen and driven off in. Haley was actually wearing her victim's earrings at the time. They actually begged for the officers to just shoot them and end their lives, but they wouldn't get away that easily. Thelma's husband Kevin wasn't actually allowed to see his wife's body due to the extent of her injuries. The autopsy revealed that she'd fought for her life, with many defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Since the murder, Stephen and Haley have both tried to blame each other. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and apparently showed no emotion as the verdict was read out. Haley is currently awaiting trial.